We live in an amazing time because knowledge about the world around us is changing at an astounding rate. Almost every day we learn something new. However, the more new things we learn about the structure of the world, the more questions we have about it. And even avid adherents of the scientific point of view on the formation of the universe and man cannot defend their position completely and irrevocably. Moreover, now in scientific circles it has become a popular opinion that we cannot prove the existence of God, as well as make sure of his absence. Remarkably, there are facts that cannot be described by science alone, nor can religions accurately describe the existing model of the universe. Moreover, there are new sources of knowledge, some long forgotten or hidden, that shed light on the dark pages of the history of the human race and astound the imagination. By the way, the written history of mankind can barely be counted 5,000 years, but a reasonable man in his present form has been living for tens, and according to other data, hundreds of thousands of years. And just because there are no written records of that time does not mean that people lived in deep ignorance at that time. On the contrary, there is evidence to the contrary. For example, the same pyramids of ancient Egypt, Mayan monuments, and the remains of pra-civilization in India. In general, on every continent, scientists find traces of the existence of super-civilizations that have not survived to our time. And the absence of written evidence only shows that they lived so long ago that no writing could have survived for so long, unless it was rock art. But cave writing and painting are still the works of rather low civilizations in their development. It is unlikely that a modern book will be preserved in a readable form for at least 1,000 years. But in our story today, we would like to touch upon such a seemingly trivial source of information as the Bible. And all because many scientists agree that some stories from the Holy Scriptures describe quite real events in the history of mankind. So, for example, the world flood could well have happened, and surely was, in the form of a similar cataclysm. Moreover, there are DNA studies that prove that several thousand years ago, mankind went through the so-called bottleneck of its development. In simple terms, at a certain point in existence, humans became so few that they barely survived. We're practically related to each other. Are not scientists hinting that a few families were really saved on Noah's Ark? All of this and more makes us take a closer look at what Scripture tells us. Moreover, it turns out that the modern Bible can be quite far removed from the original text. This is hinted at, for example, by the so-called Apocrypha, parts of the Scriptures that were not only not included in the main canon, but were removed from it and consigned to oblivion. We are talking now about the 2,000-year-old Bible, or the Book of Enoch. In general, everything that most Christians know about God and Jesus is described in the New Testament. But there is also the Old Testament, which no one has abandoned, but it is not so popular and is taken only to illuminate certain truths. As for the Book of Enoch, it is a so-called apocryphal book, a writing that was not included in the main canon or even later excluded from it. Why did this happen? And why did the revelations of the elder Enoch so frighten the luminaries of the church that they tried to hide his several books on the farthest and dusty shelf? Moreover, for several hundred years the Book of Enoch was considered irretrievably lost, so well hidden. Meanwhile, Enoch is not at all worthy of oblivion. This character is also in the modern Bible, simply because it is impossible to get rid of him completely. First of all, he is the great-grandson of Adam himself, and secondly, he is the great-grandfather of Noah, whose ark we have already inadvertently remembered. He lived 365 years and never died. So who are we even talking about? According to the Holy Scriptures, Enoch is an ancient patriarch who lived several hundred years before Christ was born. He was the son of another righteous man who lived even longer, over 900 years. However, what is more amazing is the claim of Enoch's immortality. This man did not die, but ascended to heaven with the Lord. For what, one might ask, is such an honor? But actually, that part of the story is in the Old Testament. And so we learn that Enoch seems to have earned this recognition from God through his faith and selfless service to the Lord. But was this the only difference between him and other men, that the Most High did not want his favorite to know the pain of death? There was something similar with the prophet Elijah, but these two cases are definitely out of the ordinary. Yes, it is not one book at all, but 3. According to another version, there are even 5. But the most interesting and scandalous is considered to be the first, the Book of Watchers. There were 200 of them, angels thrown to earth from heaven. They rebelled against their creator and were severely punished for it. Angels settled among men and began to live with them as equals, to live with earthly women, and those gave birth to children from them, giants. Here is a brief paraphrase of the Book of the Watchers. And there's almost nothing we haven't said. Why observers? What was their task on earth? Were they all bad? And what were these giants? The Nephilim. But Enoch gladly answers all these questions in his first book. And in general, all his creations are a description of the history of mankind and his, Enoch's, journey through the divine world, a description of its most complex structure. It is believed that the story of the fallen angels rebelling against God himself was the main reason for the removal of the Book of Enoch from the main canon of Holy Scripture. But it's not all that simple. To begin with, the book describes how angels taught people many arts and skills unknown to them before. Moreover, this period of time coincides just with the time when the Egyptian pyramids and other megaliths on the territory of the planet were created. And if you have forgotten, in the history of creation of even pyramids, there are many things unclear. For example, scientists have agreed that it was simply impossible to create such architectural monuments and ancient sarcophagi at the level of technology that the ancient Egyptians possessed. And some things are even beyond the capacity of modern technology. For example, to cut a 5-walled, 3-dimensional sarcophagus from stone, the strength of which exceeds marble. There is a hypothesis that aliens could have visited our planet and shared their technology with the ancients. But why couldn't it be the same angels? By the way, there are images of creatures that the Egyptians worshipped, and they were not only distinguished by the fact that they had the heads of various animals, but also by their high height, relative to ordinary people. It is unlikely that aliens could really look like this, with the body of an earthly man, albeit very large, but with the head of an earthly animal. By the way, tales of giants are found in many nations of the world, on all continents. So, earthly women gave birth to huge beings from angels, demigods, or Nephilim. According to different estimates and translations, they reached in height from tens to hundreds of meters. But here, everything is very conditional. These hybrids could be just very large and tall giants. Just we have not yet fully understood the length measures of the ancients. But that's not the most important thing. The important thing is that these creatures were truly insane. They suffered from constant hunger and ate everything. First, they destroyed all the people's food supply, then animals and trees, then people themselves, and then the giants began to devour themselves. It is not surprising that such lawlessness did not please God, who decided to get rid of random creatures with monstrous power once and for all. And for this purpose, he found nothing better than to organize the world flood. People, by the way, were also guilty, and therefore he decided to leave alive only relatives of Noah, who, as we remember, came from a very pious and faithful to God family. Funnily enough, the story of the Nephilim doesn't end there. You've probably heard of the term blue blood. It is usually said about people who are not only very rich, but also have a noticeable influence in society due to their noble origin. Of course, their blood is also red, but not everything is so simple. In fact, there is the same story behind the expression, "all power is from God." There is a point of view that representatives of the most ancient royal families of Europe believe that they are descendants of these very Nephilim, demigods. And that is why, contrary to all laws and rules of genetics, they continue to protect their blue blood and forbid their children to meet and marry commoners. Isn't that why, by the way, Princess Diana died, or he was killed? In fact, the other books of Enoch are no less interesting and mysterious. So the patriarch colorfully describes his journey to heaven that he does not forget to tell us that the earth is not flat at all, that there are laws of motion of heavenly luminaries, and also that hell is not under the earth at all, but in heaven. In addition, there is a whole book of predictions of the end of the world on earth, and a detailed description of its omens. And this, of course, is not all. Thus, the last book describes the creation of the world. God creates light and darkness out of two strange living creatures. But he did not create these creatures. They were with him together. So where did they come from, and were they equal to the Creator himself? And in the end, God turns Enoch into Metatron, a being divine and equal to himself, and puts him in the place next to himself instead of his own son. Or prophecies that rulers would come who would consider themselves equal to the gods or their descendants, call their nations the best, and plunge the world into constant warfare. Is this the kind of thing ordinary Christians should recognize? We don't think so, but it is all very interesting.